And welcome back to the X Zone. We're talking about bullying this hour. We have Joe the Biker with us, and he's written a book called A Parent's Guide to Bullying. Say no to bullying today. And Joe, are there any statistics to tell us how many kids do have a bad day because of bullying around throughout the country?
Well, just to throw a few numbers out at you, about 25% of the students in the schools right now will be bullied during the course of this year. And we have some 160,000 plus students every day staying home because they're afraid of what might happen to them at school. And when we start getting into the gay, lesbian, and the transgender group, we find that the statistics are even double of that.
Joe, what was the inspiration for you writing your book?
I was actually on a motorcycle trip coming back from Tennessee to Massachusetts, and I was overwhelmed on that drive back on a main route to write down my experience and my journey, because the journey started with bullying, which eventually defined me as an adult. And it wasn't until I was involved in that serious automobile accident and I healed that I come to realize that what had defined me as a man was really the byproduct of what had happened to me in my childhood.
Joe, what are some of these signs that parents might pick up that their child may be bullied at school?
Well, there are the obvious ones when a child comes home with bruises, cuts, and they give you kind of a poor reason why it happened, or their school books are damaged, clothing may be ripped, something of that nature. And if it happens continuously, they're giving you bad excuses for it. But there are other subtle type of things too. Oftentimes a child that is bullied will start to withdraw from the family unit. They may have trouble sleeping. They may even have a desire not to eat. So those are subtle signs. And in my Parent's Guide to Bullying, which is free off of my website, there are a lot more other signs that I list there for parents to look at.
Joe, when it comes to gender, is there a higher number of young ladies or young gents that are getting bullied, or is it spread across the spectrum?
I think it's about equal. That said, girls tend to bully different than boys. Boys tend to be far more physical, and girls tend to be far more subtle, more covert. They'll start a rumor, or they'll do something on Facebook. So it's actually two different approaches to bullying.
So what prevents a child from going to mom and dad and telling them about the bullying that they're being the recipient of?
There's a number of reasons, and one of them is a fear. Sometimes the fear of even telling a parent, knowing that they're going to go and contact the school, which will ultimately make it worse for them, so they believe. Sometimes children don't tell their parents because the parents don't have an open relationship, an open dialogue with their children, and that oftentimes can be preventative in that they're trying to figure out how to solve it themselves rather than get the parents involved.
Tell me, Joe, is there such a thing as a bully-proof child?
Absolutely. Absolutely, no doubt in my mind. And that is my goal as Joe the Biker, is trying to help parents bully-proof their child. I think what happens is we can't stop bullying, Rob. It's impossible because of the nature of our culture. But what we can do is give our children the tools. So if they are confronted, if they are targeted by a bully, they know what they should do. And some of those bully-proofing things are, one, to have that dialogue with a parent so they feel comfortable enough to come to a parent and tell them that they're being bullied or picked on, whatever the case may be. The other thing, too, it's really about how a child reacts to bullying that has a negative effect. So if a child usually has good, healthy self-confidence, many times they can laugh it off or they can walk away and it doesn't have an impact. There are the other children, like myself as a child, and many of your viewing audience may have experienced, they internalize that bullying. So it starts to affect their self-esteem and their personal self-image. That said, that in time will ultimately determine who they will become as an adult.
So what are some tips for parents when they actually do find out that their child is being bullied?
I think the first thing a parent has to do is really sit down and engage a conversation with their child and help them understand the most important fact. It is not them. It really is the bully who has the problem. So they have to now depersonalize it and make the child understand it has nothing to do with them. They're okay just the way they are. They're perfect. It's really about that other person who has issues in their life that causes them to come to school and look and target someone. The next thing they need to do is they need to work continuously in helping a child feel good about themselves. Finally, I think the most important step is contacting the school system. And obviously, I'm in hundreds of schools and talk to hundreds of principals. It is really critical when parents do find out that their child is being bullied, that they tell their child to start maintaining a journal, listing down when it happened, who was around, if they told an adult at the school, the witnesses, the things of that nature. And if it's happening continuously, continue to keep that journal. And the reason for that is when a parent does contact the school, they have in front of them some facts. You know, so many times principals tell me that obviously bullying is a very emotional experience. If your child is being hurt, if it was my child being hurt, you and I are going to be very upset. And because we're emotionally charged, when we contact that school, we tend to speak more out of emotion than we do out of facts. So I really recommend to parents, if their child is being bullied, that they even sit down prior to that call to the school, write down all the facts, try to keep themselves very calm and relaxed and approach it as a conflict rather than emotionally charged debate. Because every principal I've ever talked to that tells me when a parent calls and they start yelling and screaming at me or they're really emotionally charged, that shuts me right down. So that's the critical part, is really to contact the school in a cool and calm manner.
Joe, with all the schools and all the children that you've talked about bullying to on your fantastic trip, and my hat is off to you, friend, for the great work you're doing.
Thank you.
Have you noticed any kind of pattern in the children that are getting targeted? Do they share common threads?
Well, they do. In most cases, it really is about being different. And I was different when I was called Yubbie. I was quite fat, overweight. And it was because I was different. And because the bully, when they look at somebody that's different, they test the waters. So they say something and they're looking for how you're going to react to it. Well, they could tell that I was upset. They could tell that they're hurting me. And because they could see that, they would continue to do it. So the common thread could be somebody who's overweight, somebody who looks different, someone who has a different sexual preference maybe, somebody who's small, someone who's tall. I mean, I even wrote a rap song that I use in our schools that is called It's a Name, Just a Name, because oftentimes bullying starts with name calling and trying to teach children, hey, you just got to let it roll off and walk away from it. So no matter what you look like, no matter who you are, no matter what your religious beliefs are, no matter what your sexual preferences are, you have a right to be there. You're okay just the way you are, and you have a right to be protected. And so that really describes the thread that runs in between all the children that are bullied.
All right, Joe, we hear so much about the children who are being targeted, but what about the children who are the bullies? What is it that triggers them into being bullies?
Excellent question, Rob. As I tell my student audiences, no one who was in a crib was born a bully. When kids are born, there are no bullies. It's a very rare, very low percentage where a child would have a psychological problem that would eventually turn out to be a bully. So it's something that happened from the time that they were born to the time they went to school. And so that reflects us back to the home. And there are a lot of things that parents do that can develop a bully without them even realizing it. And one that really comes to mind is permissive aggressiveness. A household where there's a lot of screaming and yelling, and that's how they deal with conflict. A child learns very quickly that it is okay to be aggressive. And so what happens? They look at their parents are the role model, they go to school, and they figure when they're upset or they're angered, they can act just the way that the parents acted. You know, it's not that old, do as I say and not as I do type thing. So parents have to realize that everything that they do in front of their children is actually a TV screen, and that child is absorbing everything from the day they're born and is their foundation, their basis of behavior when they first go to school. Another one that comes to mind is inappropriate discipline. So think of it. If a child is at home and the parents have an approach to discipline where they spank the child, worse, if they're spanking a child when they're angered, what are we telling that child? We're telling that child, when you do something wrong, when you get angry, it's okay to go and hit someone. So what do? They go to school, and the next thing you know, they get angered or something of that nature, and they respond the same way they've been taught. So that's why it's critical when I talk to parents and all the various PTOs and PTAs that I present to, that they really have to be conscientious on how they deal with conflict in the home, because they are the teachers, the primary teachers of how that child is going to deal with conflict.
All right, Joe, stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exo Nation, Joe Wojcik is our special guest. He's also known as Joe the Biker. We're talking about bullying this hour, and Joe's got a book out, Say No to Bullying Today, www.joethebiker.com. And there's also www.yubbiefoundation.org, and that's YUBBIE Foundation.org. Joe the Biker and I return on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone. Don't go away. Listening to the X Zone Radio Show, live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, and Star Cable. Our toll-free telephone number worldwide is 1-800-610-7035. And welcome back, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, and my guest this hour is Joe Wojcik. We're talking to Joe about his new book, Say No to Bullying Today. His website is www.joethebiker.com. That's www.joethebiker.com. Joe, how effective are the laws that are presently in place? And, many schools have their kids transported into the school from by school buses. Other kids take municipal buses or city transit. Others take the subway or however they get to school. And are the laws that are presently in place the proper laws? And if not, Joe, how would you change them?
Well, there are a number of laws, and that varies from state to state here in the United States. I'm not sure how it works in Canada. But that said, what happens is it's very easy to create a law, but enforcing that law is much more difficult. So most states that have these laws try to define what bullying is and put into place plans in their school districts where there's a reporting process of what's happening. Now, that all sounds good. However, what we find out is that in a lot of cases, things aren't reported because of the consequence of a database being created on an individual, let's say at the state capitol, who has been recorded as being a bully or is not behaving properly at school. Right. So that becomes an issue where principals are hesitant to really go and follow through with the reporting process of it. And there's really, in most states, not a consequence, not a legal consequence to bullying, even though there's a law. And there's still been not any really precedent set as far as what the penalty is, because there are so many other things bullying can be. It can be stalking. It can be, they try to use the word harassing in there. And so they're having a difficult time in most states to enforce the law that they created. Now, school districts, as I've gone through so many different states, in each state, each school district has different rules and different policies. And it's not until probably an event happens at their school that they start doing something on the buses. Some buses have TV, cameras on them. But then again, we have to rely on the bus driver. So unfortunately, even though with all good intentions, there's all these laws and rules and plans in place, they aren't as enforced as they could be. I think really what we need to do as a culture is we really need to create an atmosphere of a reporting system where we have anonymous websites or anonymous way of reporting an incident that goes into a database that's dispersed to administrators in that school district who immediately now can take action on it and then be responsible by law. So here again, there is no consequence to the principal if he doesn't or she doesn't report it. We're talking about a consequence to the child that's a bully. And so by forcing administrators to make these reports and having a consequence if they don't, that in itself now enforces the law a little bit further. But at the end of the day, we can't stop bullying. So that's why I continuously try to encourage parents to bulletproof their child, not to put the weight on the schools, not to put the weight on the administrators or even the laws. The parents can help a child feel good enough about themselves where they're going to report it, and then the parents, who are the child's advocate, can take the appropriate action with the school district.
Do you find when you go out and talk to schools that parents come to get involved? Because wouldn't that be a very important part of the formula, is to have the parent present when you're talking to the children about bullying, so the parents and both the children understand that the communication between the two of them is a must and is very important.
Rob, you hit it on the head. How many parents call me? Because I actually offer consultations to parents whose child is being bullied. And typically one of my questions would be, do you belong to the PTO or the PTA, which is a parent-teachers organization or association? And you'd be surprised. Parents don't get involved with the schools. And I say, well, your child's there for pretty much the whole day. You're wondering what's happening to the child. One way to build a relationship with that school is to become an active member of their parents group, whatever it may be at the school. Now what you do is that parent-teachers group actually has a relationship now with the school. And of course you have a lot more power because of the numbers of being able to go into a principal's office, sit down and to discuss an issue, or even get the feedback from the principal about what's happening in their schools. So I strongly encourage parents to get involved with their child's school, to become a part. If they can volunteer, great. If anything, become a member of the parent-teachers organization.
Joe, what is the number one complaint or the number one comment you hear from parents when it comes to bullying?
Usually it's that the school doesn't believe that their child is being bullied, or that the school is not taking any steps to solve the problem. I think that's, if there was one, that's what parents feel like their hands are tied. They contact the school and the school's not doing anything about it. And I want to say, frankly, from my experience talking to principals, most of the schools I've been to do take action, and principals do an investigation. But what happens is if you have no witnesses, and I talk about intervening as part of my presentation to students, how important it is for anyone who sees somebody being bullied to stand up and do the right thing. Kids are afraid to intervene. Kids are afraid to tattle. And I try to overcome those obstacles when I talk to them. But that's the important thing, is that if there are no witnesses to it that are willing to come forward, what does a principal do? They hear one story, they hear another story, and the truth lies somewhere in between it. So now they got a parent calling them up, maybe very emotionally charged, and they say, well, what do you want me to do? I got two different stories here. So I think that's one of the biggest frustrations that I think parents experience.
Now, after you have your program at a school, is there any noticeable decrease in bullying that goes on?
There are. Matter of fact, and I am humble to say this, Rob, during my presentations, because I talk about feeling okay about yourself, to be proud of who you are as a person to a student, I've had students come forward, and I've had as many as 1,000 students in a presentation come up to me afterwards, pull on my jacket, and tell me of incidents of bullying that they never reported. or I've had students, and again, I'm not God, it's not my role to judge people, to stand up in front of an audience and tell everybody that of their sexual preference. And in one case, a counselor came up to me flabbergasted saying, this kid has dealt with this issue for over a year. They've been picked on. We know about it. For that boy to stand up and to say that in front of everybody because you made him feel good. So I'd like to think, and I've been told by many a principal and counselor, that after Joe the Biker leaves their school, the students feel empowered. They feel that they're a part of community. Their school is a community. Everybody in that school is part of it, and that it is their job to respect and protect each member. And they feel comfortable enough knowing that every adult in that school, from the janitor all the way up to the principal, is an adult who cares and who wants to help them. And they got to feel free coming forward and talking to that individual. And finally, to me, the critical thing is to make a child understand it is not about them. They are just a target, and it is the bully, that other person who really has that problem, and because he's part or she's part of our community, it's our obligation to tell people about it so we can get that person help, because something's happening in their life that causes them to act that way.
Joe, there are schools in the United States that have a police officer stationed at the school. In these schools, are there reported cases of bullying that go on, or is the police officer, who acts more like a liaison officer, a community officer, does he actually thwart the bully attacks because of his presence?
He doesn't, or she, no. Because what happens really, Rob, in those particular situations, and I've gone to many of schools that have police officers. Now, their role there is more about weapons, violence, maybe drugs, even though they're there as a monitor. And they are the ones that may be getting involved after there is a bullying incident. Keep in mind, we cannot stop bullying from happening, because we're always going to have children who come possibly from homes that have issues that come into a school and bully. And so we have laws against drunk driving. That doesn't stop people from driving drunk. So we have a police officer at the school. That's not going to stop that child who has an issue in their life that causes them to become a bully, to come into that school and misbehave. Obviously, there's something in the works to have a police officer there should be turned violent, or if there's any weapons involved or things of that nature, but it doesn't stop the incident from happening.
Do you think there should be police officers in schools? You know, you've gone through enough schools to know if they have do they have a place in the school?
Well, in the inner city schools that I've been into, some of them, I got to say I'd prefer to see a police officer there. And the reason why is, like in Boston, Massachusetts, a lot of these inner city schools have gang members of local gangs, and gang members hang around the school. So I think a police presence has a value. And when you get out of the big cities or the real tough parts of big cities, then I don't really think it's that necessary. I think the administration of the school should be able to handle it.
Is your program an ongoing program? Do you go back to the school to see how they're doing? Do you help set up projects within the schools with teachers, principals, administrators, and parents?
Typically, I have feedback over a period of a year time. If they took the Say No to Bullying Today program, I work with the administration, I work with the teachers, and I also, most importantly, work with the parents. So anyone who takes the entire program. Oftentimes, schools just have me come in as Joe the Biker to do a performance. And the only way I can tell you my effectiveness is that I'm continuously sought at to come back to their school year after year because of how effective the message was.
You go back to their school year after year, Joe. Do you ever get some of these kids who you've actually helped over the years want to be a person like you to be part of the solution instead of the problem?
I have probably 4,000 kids that contact me on Facebook. And
wow.
I have had students who told me that I changed their life. And I say this humbly because I'm there to help them. And I have had kids that were bullies that actually turned around and said they were going to stop their behavior because of the message I conveyed that day. And I've had children who are being bullied who contact me and saying, I don't know what to do. And I usually Facebook them back and tell them, how important it is to tell their parents or find someone at their school who's an adult, even if it's the lady behind the kitchen counter, to go up to somebody they can trust and convey it to them so they can get them help, because we want them protected.
What, in your opinion, Joe, is the worst case of bullying that you've ever heard about?
Well, I think any times when a bullying ends up in what is called bullycide, where a child takes their life, is the worst of all case scenarios. And I've unfortunately came from a community just 10 minutes down the road, 15 from where I lived. A girl took her life, Phoebe Prince. Maybe you heard about her in the news. And also Sir Denier Walker, who's the mother of Carl Joseph Walker from Springfield, Mass., which was another 15 minutes in another direction from me, at 11 years old, took his life. As a child, when I was called a Yubbie, there was a point where I attempted to take my life on several occasions. And I get pretty choked up when I talk about it, only because, that's what people have to understand, and parents have to understand. There's no erasers or delete buttons inside our heads. So when we're traumatized and we're scarred as a child, it stays with us forever. And
that's why you and I have to take our final break.
Okay.
Donation Bill the Bikers, my special guest this hour. And of course, his real name is Joseph Wojcik. His website is www.joethebiker.com. He's the author of Say No to Bullying Today. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. This hour, we're talking about bullying and what parents can do to prevent bullying in the classroom and schoolyard. Joe's book is entitled Say No to Bullying Today. His website is www.joethebiker.com. Joe, tell me about your foundation that you've got going, the Yubbie Foundation.
Yeah, the Yubbie Foundation was started because I use that name, Yubbie, as an acronym in my performances with students about the tools they need to use to deal with bullying. So back about 2008, because of the current economic situation in most school districts, they really don't have the money to bring in performances and presentations and even to get material. So I started the Yubbie Foundation, which is a 501c3, and I tried to get local companies to partner with the Yubbie Foundation to put my performances, presentations, and my Say No to Bullying Today program into schools.
And how is it being received, Joe?
From who?
Well, from the people that you go after to be part of the foundation and support the foundation.
Well, I've been very fortunate. Banks typically are very community-minded, and so they like to take advantage of the exposure that they get. They believe in my mission, and they're willing to support. Recently, Walmart, and I'll put a plug in for them, gave me a grant in order to continue my work here down in Florida. So I do find businesses that are community-minded, that are willing to support my mission.
How about law enforcement?
Law enforcement, again, it's really budgetary with them. Some of them have a DARE program here in the United States, which could really deal with bullying in it. This summer, I've presented 4 times for the Police Athletic League here in Fort Pierce, Florida. So they support it and have me come in and do presentations. But it's challenging for them to really find the money in their budget to sponsor my program sometimes.
Joe, where can people get a copy of your book, Say No to Bullying Today?
Well, they can go to my website, as you mentioned, www.joethebiker.com. And most importantly, any parents that are listening, you can go to my site for no charge. It's totally free. You can get my download, my Parents' Guide to Bullying, which has tremendous amounts of helpful information and resources for parents that will help them know more about bullying and what should they do if their child, in fact, is either a bully or being bullied.
Joe, I want to thank you so so much for joining us tonight here in the X Zone. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. And I hope that you and I have a pleasure to meet once again. And hopefully one day we'll be talking and bullying will be a thing of the past. We can only hope. I hope
so, too. And I do thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you and your audience.
Joe, take care of yourself. Great talking to you. And congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you very much.
Next